Hello, friends. Have you ever spent years studying English grammar, memorizing rules, learning tenses, doing exercises again and again, but when someone speaks to you in real life, your mind suddenly goes blank and you still cannot answer naturally? Have you ever known the grammar perfectly in your head, but failed to say even one simple sentence under pressure? Have you ever felt embarrassed after a conversation because deep down you knew what you wanted to say, but the words just never came out? Have you ever sat there silently while someone waited for your response, feeling your heart race as your brain desperately searched for the correct grammar instead of simply speaking? Have you ever wondered why, after all this studying, you still freeze in real conversations, while other people who know less grammar seem to speak more confidently than you? If that feels painfully familiar, then listen carefully, because this may completely change the way you see English forever. The problem is not your vocabulary, it is not your intelligence, and it is definitely not because you are bad at languages. The real problem is that you were trained to study English instead of use English. You were taught to think about grammar instead of training your brain to communicate in real time. And that system has quietly destroyed your confidence without you even realizing it, because every time you try to speak, your brain stops to check rules instead of expressing ideas. And that is exactly why you feel stuck. But today, you are going to see a completely different approach, one that finally makes speaking feel natural, simple, and real. And once you understand it, you may realize that the thing slowing down your English the most was not your lack of effort. It was your obsession with grammar all along. And if you feel frustrated hearing that, you should, because nobody ever told you the truth about why you still cannot speak after studying for so many years. Nobody told you that grammar was never supposed to be the center of your learning. It was only supposed to support communication, but the system made grammar feel like the entire language. So you spent years trying to avoid mistakes instead of learning how to express yourself naturally, and slowly, without noticing it, your brain developed a dangerous habit. Every time you wanted to speak, you stopped to analyze first. You checked tenses, sentence structure, word order, and while you were thinking, the moment passed, the conversation moved on, and all you were left with was silence and regret. And after enough painful moments, you started believing something was wrong with you. Maybe you are too slow. Maybe your memory is bad. Maybe you are just not confident enough. But none of that is true. The real issue is that your brain was trained in the wrong order. You learned rules before reaction, perfection before communication, accuracy before confidence. And that completely reversed the natural process of speaking, because real communication does not happen through conscious grammar analysis. It happens through fast automatic patterns built through repetition and exposure. And the reason children can speak fluently without understanding grammar rules is because speaking was never designed to start with analysis. It starts with imitation, reaction, repetition, and emotional connection. But the systems ignored that. It forced you into classrooms where speaking became a test instead of a tool, and over time you became afraid of mistakes instead of excited to communicate. And this is why even now, when you know enough English to understand videos or read simple content, you still hesitate when it is time to talk because your brain is trying to protect you from making errors instead of helping you communicate freely. And once you finally understand that, something powerful happens. You stop blaming yourself and you start realizing that fluency is not about becoming perfect at grammar. It is about retraining your brain to respond naturally without fear. And that is exactly what you are about to learn next. I remember a moment that completely changed the way I saw English forever. I was sitting in front of someone who asked me a very simple question in English. Nothing advanced, nothing difficult, just a normal everyday question. And the strange thing was, I understood every single word instantly. I knew the grammar, I knew the vocabulary, I even knew exactly what I wanted to say in my head. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out naturally. My brain suddenly became slow. I started checking grammar rules in my head. I tried to build the perfect sentence. And while I was doing that, the silence became awkward. The other person waited. I smiled nervously, and I gave a short, broken answer that sounded nothing like what I wanted to say. And after that conversation ended, I remember walking away, feeling deeply disappointed in myself. Because I realized something painful. Years of studying grammar had not prepared me to actually speak. And that moment stayed in my mind for a very long time because I knew I was not stupid. I knew I had worked hard, but I also knew something about the way I learned English was completely wrong. So I started observing people who spoke fluently, especially people who were not obsessed with grammar. And I noticed something interesting. They were not speaking, because they knew every rule. They were speaking because they had trained their brain to react quickly. And naturally, they used patterns, repetition, listening, imitation, and daily speaking exposure. They focused on communication first and correction later. And slowly, I started changing the way I practiced English. Instead of sitting for hours studying grammar explanations, I spent more time listening to real speech, repeating phrases out loud, shadowing conversations, answering simple questions quickly without overthinking. And at first, it felt uncomfortable because I was so used to stopping myself every few seconds to check if my grammar was correct. But over time, something incredible happened. My speaking became faster. My fear became smaller. My sentences started flowing more naturally. And for the first time in my life, English stopped feeling like an exam and started feeling like a real language I could actually use. And that experience taught me something I will never get. For grammar does not create fluency. Communication creates fluency. And once you stop treating English like a school subject and start treating it like a real life skill, everything begins to change in ways you never thought possible. So here is the big idea that most English learners never hear clearly enough. Stop trying to master grammar before you speak, because speaking is not created by perfect grammar knowledge. Speaking is created by repeated communication experiences, and this single realization changes everything. And because for years, you were taught that fluency would come after enough grammar study, that one day after memorizing enough rules, you would magically become confident and natural. But that day never came. And the reason is simple. Grammar knowledge and speaking ability are not the same skill. Knowing grammar is conscious knowledge, but speaking is an automatic reaction, and automatic reactions are not built through analysis. They are built through repetition, exposure, imitation, emotion, and real usage. And this is why so many people who study grammar for years still freeze in conversations, while some people with broken grammar can communicate confidently and naturally. Because confidence comes from use, not from perfection. And once you understand that, your entire learning process starts to shift. You stop asking, how can I avoid mistakes? And start asking, how can I communicate more often? Because communication is the real training ground of fluency. Every time you listen to real English, every time you repeat a phrase out loud, every time you answer quickly without translating, every time you express an idea even imperfectly, your brain becomes faster and more flexible. And that is how real speaking ability is formed. Not through endless correction, but through repeated use. And this is the part that feels shocking to many learners. You do not need perfect grammar to become a confident speaker. You need enough language to communicate and enough repetition to make it automatic. Grammar can help refine your English later, but it should never become the wall that stops you from speaking now, because the longer you wait to become perfect before speaking, the longer your fear grows stronger, and the more your brain associates English with stress and hesitation. But when you start speaking first and correcting gradually through use, your brain begins to relax, your reactions become faster, and English slowly starts feeling natural instead of heavy. And that is the real goal, not perfect English, but usable English, real English, living English that comes out of your mouth without fear controlling every word you say. Let me show you exactly what this looks like in real life. Because once you see the difference between grammar, studying, and communication training, you will never look at English the same way again. Imagine a learner who spends 2 hours studying grammar rules about the present perfect tense. They memorize structures, exceptions, signal words, and complete exercises perfectly on paper, but later someone asks them a simple question like, have you seen that movie? And suddenly their brain slows down because they are trying to remember rules before answering. Now compare that to another learner who spends those same 2 hours listening to real conversations, repeating phrases out loud, shadowing native speakers, answering simple questions quickly, and using phrases naturally like, yeah, I watched it last week, or no, but I want to see it. That learner may not explain grammar perfectly, but when it is time to communicate, they respond faster and more naturally because their brain has been trained for communication, not analysis. And this is the biggest misunderstanding in English learning. People think speaking comes from studying the language, but speaking actually comes from using the language repeatedly in realistic situations. And you can see this everywhere. There are people with strong grammar who stay silent in conversations. And there are people with imperfect grammar who can speak confidently for hours because communication is not a grammar competition. It is the ability to express meaning in real time. And here is another example. Imagine you want to say, I was so tired yesterday that I fell asleep on the sofa. A grammar-focused learner may stop and think about past tense forms, sentence structure, and correctness, but a communication-focused learner says it immediately, maybe imperfectly, maybe not elegant, but naturally enough to keep the conversation moving. And that speed matters more than perfection in real life, because conversations do not wait for perfect grammar. They move quickly, emotionally, naturally. And this is why native speakers make grammar mistakes all the time, but still communicate effortlessly, because fluency is built on automatic patterns, not constant analysis. And once you begin training English through speaking, listening, repeating, reacting, and expressing ideas instead of obsessing over rules, something incredible happens. Your brain starts building natural connections between thoughts and words. You stop translating as much. You stop freezing so often. And for the first time, English begins to feel alive instead of academic. And that is the moment most learners suddenly say, wow, so this is why I couldn't speak before. Because they finally realized the problem was never lack of grammar knowledge. It was lack of communication training all along. So now the question becomes very simple. If you stop focusing so much on grammar, then what should you actually do every day to become a better speaker? And the answer is not complicated at all. In fact, the system works precisely because it is simple. Because fluency is not built through difficult methods. It is built through consistent daily communication training. And here is the system I want you to start using. Every single day, focus on 3 things only. Listen, repeat, and respond. That's it. Not memorize rules for hours, not study complicated grammar charts. Just train your brain to connect sound, meaning, and speech naturally. So first start with listening to real English every day, not educational grammar explanations, but real conversations, interviews, podcasts, short videos, anything where English is being used naturally. Because your brain needs exposure to real speaking patterns, rhythm, pronunciation, and emotional tone. Then comes the second step. Repeat everything out loud immediately. This is critical because silent learning creates passive understanding, but active speaking creates fluency. So when you hear a sentence like, I'm really tired today, do not analyze it. Do not translate it. Just repeat it instantly, again and again, copying the speed and emotion of the speaker. This trains automatic speech patterns directly into your brain. And then comes the third step. Respond after hearing or repeating something. Ask yourself simple questions and answer quickly in English. If you hear, I'm really tired today, answer with, yeah, I'm tired too. Or, no, I feel great today. The goal is speed, not perfection. Because fast response training is what builds real communication ability, and the most powerful part of this system is that it does not require hours of study. Even 15 or 20 minutes every day done consistently can completely change the way your brain processes English, because now you are no longer training memory alone. You are training reaction, expression, and communication. And that is why this method feels so different from traditional learning. Traditional learning teaches you to think about English. This system teaches you to use English. And once your brain experiences that difference repeatedly, something amazing begins to happen. You stop freezing as often. Your mouth becomes more comfortable producing English sounds. Your thoughts connect faster to words. And slowly, speaking starts feeling more natural, not because you mastered every grammar rule, but because you finally trained the skill that actually matters most, the ability to communicate in real time without fear stopping you every few seconds. Right now, I do not want you to just understand this idea intellectually. I want you to feel it directly for yourself, because the moment you experience real communication without overthinking grammar, everything starts changing inside your brain. So let's do something together right now. Very simple, very practical, and I want you to follow immediately without stopping to think. Imagine someone asks you a simple question. How are you today? Normally, your brain may freeze for a second while checking grammar or searching for the perfect answer. But this time, I want you to respond instantly. Say, I'm good today, out loud right now, not in your head, out loud. Now again, but faster. I'm good today. Notice how your mouth moves more naturally when you stop analyzing and simply react. Now another one. Imagine someone asks, what did you do today? Instead of building a perfect sentence, answer quickly with something simple like, I worked today, or I studied English today. Say it immediately, even if it feels imperfect, because the goal is not perfect grammar, the goal is communication speed. Now let's go one step further. I want you to repeat after me without thinking. I want to speak English confidently. Again, I want to speak English confidently. Faster now. I want to speak English confidently. Feel what is happening. Your brain is starting to focus on expression instead of fear. And this is exactly how fluency begins. Not through silent studying, but through repeated speaking actions that train automatic responses. And now answer this question immediately in English without translating. What do you want to improve? Just speak. Maybe you say, I want better speaking, or I want more confidence. It does not matter if the grammar is perfect. What matters is that your brain is learning to move without stopping every few seconds to check rules. And every time you practice like this, you weaken the habit of overthinking and strengthen the habit of communicating. And that is why this kind of training is so powerful, because it forces your English to become active instead of passive, real instead of theoretical, living instead of academic. And if you continue doing this every day, even for a short amount of time, you will slowly notice something incredible. Your fear decreases, your reaction speed improves, and English begins to feel less like a school subject and more like a natural part of your real life conversations. Now, this is where the real transformation begins, because speaking English has never been only about language. It has always been about identity. For years, you may have seen yourself as someone who is not ready yet, someone who needs more grammar, more vocabulary, more preparation before speaking, and that identity quietly controlled your behavior every single day. It made you hesitate, it made you stay silent, it made you afraid of mistakes. Because deep inside you believed speaking was something dangerous, something that could expose your imperfections. And the more you protected yourself from mistakes, the less experience you gained with real communication. And slowly your fears became stronger than your ability. But now you need to understand something powerful. Fluency is not built by people who wait until they are perfect. Fluency is built by people who are willing to speak before they feel ready. And that is a completely different mindset, because from this moment forward, you must stop identifying as a student who studies grammar and start identifying as a communicator who uses English daily, even imperfectly, even awkwardly, even with mistakes. Because communication is not about performing perfectly, it is about expressing meaning and connecting with people. And once you truly accept that, something changes inside your brain. Mistakes stop feeling like failure and start feeling like progress. Because every sentence you say, even broken sentences, trains your speaking system more than hours of silent grammar study. And this is why many learners stay trapped for years. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they are emotionally addicted to preparation. They keep preparing instead of participating, studying instead of speaking, analyzing instead of expressing. And the longer that continues, the more impossible speaking feels. But the moment you start speaking first and correcting later, fear slowly loses control over you. Your brain becomes more flexible. Your reactions become faster. And confidence begins to grow naturally through experience, not through theory. And this is the mindset shift that changes everything. Stop asking yourself, what if I make mistakes? And start asking yourself, what if I finally allow myself to communicate? Because communication is the real path to fluency, not perfection. And once you truly understand that emotionally, not just intellectually, English stops feeling like a wall in front of you and starts becoming a tool you can actually use to express your thoughts, your personality, and your real self without fear holding you back anymore. Now, I want to challenge you not to study harder, not to memorize more grammar, but to finally prove to yourself that you can communicate without hiding behind perfection anymore. Because if you keep doing what you have always done, you will keep getting the same result. More understanding, but no real speaking confidence. So, for the next 7 days, I want you to stop studying grammar completely. Yes, completely. No grammar videos, no grammar exercises, no memorizing rules. And instead, I want you to spend just 20 minutes every day doing only communication training. And here is exactly what you will do. First, listen to 1 minute of real English audio, something natural and conversational. Then repeat every sentence out loud immediately, copying the rhythm, emotion, and speed as closely as possible. Then answer simple questions out loud about your own life without stopping to think about grammar. Questions like, what did you do today? How do you feel right now? Or what do you want this year? And the rule is simple. You are not allowed to stop speaking just because you are unsure about grammar. You must continue expressing your idea anyway, because that is exactly how real fluency develops, through movement, not perfection. And at the end of every day, I want you to record yourself speaking English for 1 minute without pausing. Even if your sentences are broken, even if you make mistakes, because this challenge is not about sounding perfect. It is about training your brain to stop fearing communication. And here is what will probably happen during those 7 days. The first few days may feel uncomfortable. Your brain will try to pull you back into grammar thinking, because that is what it is used to. You may feel awkward speaking without checking rules, but if you keep going, something surprising will happen. Your speaking will slowly become faster. Your hesitation will become smaller, and you will start noticing moments where English comes out more naturally than before. And those moments are incredibly important because they prove something powerful. You do not need perfect grammar to communicate. You need courage, repetition, and daily speaking exposure. And if you complete this challenge honestly, you will experience more real speaking growth in 7 days than you experienced in months of passive grammar study. Because for the first time, you are finally training the skill that matters most, real communication under real conditions, and that experience can completely change the way you learn English forever. Now, I want to challenge you not to study harder, not to memorize more grammar, but to finally prove to yourself that you can communicate without hiding behind perfection anymore. Because if you keep doing what you have always done, you will keep getting the same result, more understanding, but no real speaking confidence. So for the next 7 days, I want you to stop studying grammar completely. Yes, completely. No grammar videos, no grammar exercises, no memorizing rules. And instead, I want you to spend just 20 minutes every day doing only communication training. And here is exactly what you will do. First, listen to 1 minute of real English audio, something natural and conversational. Then repeat every sentence out loud this immediately, copying the rhythm, emotion, and speed as closely as possible. Then answer simple questions out loud about your own life without stopping to think about grammar. Questions like, what did you do today? How do you feel right now? Or, what do you want this year? And the rule is simple. You are not allowed to stop speaking just because you are unsure about grammar. You must continue expressing your idea anyway, because that is exactly how real fluency develops, through movement, not perfection. And at the end of every day, I want you to record yourself speaking English for 1 minute without pausing, even if your sentences are broken, even if you make mistakes, because this challenge is not about sounding perfect. It is about training your brain to stop fearing communication. And here is what will probably happen during those 7 days. The first few days may feel uncomfortable. Your brain will try to pull you back into grammar thinking, because that is what it is used to. You may feel awkward speaking without checking rules, but if you keep going, something surprising will happen. Your speaking will slowly become faster. Your hesitation will become smaller, and you will start noticing moments where English comes out more naturally than before, and those moments are incredibly important because they prove something powerful. You do not need perfect grammar to communicate. You need courage, repetition, and daily speaking exposure. And if you complete this challenge honestly, you will experience more real speaking growth in 7 days than you experienced in months of passive grammar study, because for the first time, you are finally training the skill that matters most, real communication under real conditions. And that experience can completely change the way you learn English forever. And when you say that one sentence, even if it sounds imperfect, even if it feels uncomfortable, I want you to understand how important that moment really is. Because for years, your relationship with English may have been built around fear, hesitation, correction, and silence. But now something different has started. Now you are no longer waiting for perfect grammar before speaking. You are finally allowing yourself to communicate like a real human being, and that single shift changes everything. Because fluency is not created in one magical moment. It is built sentence by sentence, repetition by repetition, day by day, through small acts of courage that slowly retrain your brain to stop fearing mistakes and start focusing on connection instead. And the truth is, the people who become fluent are not always the smartest. They are not always the people with the best grammar knowledge. They are the people who keep using the language, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when they sound imperfect, even when they feel nervous, because communication grows through use, not through hiding. And from this moment forward, I want you to remember one thing. Every time fear tries to stop you, your goal is not to sound perfect. Your goal is to express yourself, because every time you choose to speak instead of staying silent, you are building a stronger speaking brain, a more confident identity, and a more natural connection with English. And over time, those small moments begin to compound in ways that feel almost unbelievable. One day, you suddenly realize you are answering faster, thinking less, reacting naturally, laughing during conversations instead of panicking during them. And that is the moment you finally understand what real fluency feels like. Not perfection, but freedom. Freedom to communicate your thoughts without fear controlling every word. And once you experience that feeling, you will never want to go back to the old way of learning again. Because now you know the truth. Grammar alone was never going to save your speaking. Real communication was, and from today onward, you have a choice every single day. Continue hiding behind rules or start building fluency through real speaking experiences. And if you choose the second path consistently, even imperfectly, your English will change in ways you once thought were impossible. So keep listening, keep repeating, keep responding, keep speaking before fear has time to stop you, because the voice you have been afraid to use may become the exact thing that changes your entire future, one sentence at a time. Stop spending all your time studying grammar and start training real communication every day by listening to natural English, repeating sentences out loud, shadowing native speakers, answering simple questions quickly without overthinking, speaking even when you make mistakes, recording your voice daily, and focusing on communication instead of perfection. Because fluency grows through use, not fear. And if this video helped you see English in a new way, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing. It truly helps me continue creating practical speaking videos that make English feel simpler, more natural, and more possible for everyday learners like you.